The crack of a bullwhip tore through the Montana air as Pearl Harrington flinched against the wooden post where her hands had been bound. The sun beat down relentlessly, casting harsh shadows across the makeshift auction block, erected outside Brimstone Creek's only saloon. It was 1877, and at 20 years old, Pearl never imagined she'd be standing here displayed like cattle, her dignity stripped away by circumstances beyond her control. "Next up," bellowed the auctioneer, a portly man with yellow teeth and whiskey on his breath. "This fine young woman, good for cooking, cleaning, and whatever else you might fancy." His crude wink sent ripples of laughter through the crowd of rough men gathered in the dusty street. "Bidding starts at $20. Pearl kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, refusing to acknowledge the humiliation burning through her veins. 6 months ago, she'd been the cherished daughter of a respected rancher. Now, after her father's death and the seizure of their land for unpaid debts, she was property to be bartered. 25, called a gruff voice from the crowd. 30, countered another. Pearl's heart hammered against her ribs. These weren't proper bids for employment. This was a thinly veiled slave auction in all but name, operating in the lawless corners of the territory where such transactions still occurred, despite being officially outlawed. "I've got 40 from the gentleman in the back," the auctioneer announced, pointing toward a man Pearl couldn't see from her position. 45, shouted someone else. $50, called a voice that sent ice through Pearl's veins. Vernon Stokes, the owner of the largest ranch neighboring her father's land. The same man who'd orchestrated her father's financial ruin. The same man who'd been watching her with predatory eyes since she was 16. "I've got 50, the auctioneer said, scanning the crowd. "Going once, a saddle." The declaration silenced the murmurs. The crowd parted to reveal a tall figure silhouetted against the afternoon sun. Pearl squinted, trying to make out the stranger's features. "What's that, mister?" the auctioneer asked, confusion evident in his voice. The stranger stepped forward, leading a magnificent chestnut stallion. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson. "I said, a saddle. Hand-tooled leather from the finest craftsman in Santa Fe, worth more than $100 to any man who knows horse flesh." The auctioneer eyed the saddle draped over the stranger's arm with unconcealed interest. The leather gleamed with intricate designs, silver conchos catching the sunlight. "Let me see that," he demanded, stepping forward to inspect the offering. As the auctioneer examined the saddle, Pearl finally got a clear view of the stranger. He couldn't have been more than 25, with a clean-shaven face and shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. Unlike the other men gathered, there was no leer in his eyes when he glanced her way, only determination and something else she couldn't quite identify. "This is mighty fine craftsmanship," the auctioneer admitted, "but Mr. Stokes here has offered $50 cash." "My saddle and $20, the stranger countered, producing a small pouch from his vest pocket. Vernon Stokes pushed through the crowd, his face mottled with anger. $60, he spat. "The saddle and 30, the stranger replied without hesitation. The bidding continued, Stokes growing increasingly agitated until he finally shouted, $100. "And that's final!" He glared at the stranger. "Walk away, boy. You don't want to make an enemy of me." The crowd hushed, tension crackling in the air. The stranger stood unflinching, his gaze steady as he removed his hat and ran a hand through dark hair streaked with sun-bleached strands. "My saddle, $50, and my horse." A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. No man in the territory would part with a horse like that. A magnificent animal that even Pearl, in her distress, recognized as worth several $100s. The auctioneer's eyes widened. "Mister, you sure about this?" "I am." "Well then," the auctioneer said, clearly unable to believe his good fortune, "I believe we have a winner." He turned to Stokes. "Unless you'd care to top that offer?" Stokes sputtered with rage, but knew he was beaten. He spat in the dust at the stranger's feet before storming away, shoving bystanders aside as he went. The auctioneer handed over the key to Pearl's shackles while accepting the saddle, money, and the horse's reins. The stranger approached Pearl cautiously, as if she were a spooked animal, and gently unlocked her bindings. "Come with me," he said quietly. Pearl rubbed her chafed wrists, uncertain. Why would you do this? You don't know me. I know enough, he replied, glancing at the retreating figure of Vernon Stokes. And no person should be sold like property. He offered his hand. My name's August North. Pearl hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. Pearl Harrington. August led her away from the auction block, aware of the curious stares following them. Once they were out of earshot, he stopped beside a hitching post, where another horse, a dappled gray mare, stood waiting. That man back there, August said, he meant you harm. Yes, Pearl replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have much choice but to intervene the only way they'd understand. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry it meant participating in their sordid business, but I couldn't see another way to help. Pearl studied his face, searching for deceit, but finding none. You gave up your horse and saddle for a stranger. August untied the gray mare. Clover here is just as reliable, and I can get another saddle. He shrugged as if the sacrifice were nothing. Then his expression softened as he looked directly into Pearl's eyes. You're priceless to me. How can I be? Pearl asked, confusion creasing her brow. We've never met. Because every human life has value beyond measure, August replied, helping her onto the mare's back. And I've seen too much injustice to stand by and watch another unfold. He mounted behind her, adding quietly, Besides, I knew your father. Jefferson Harrington was a good man who once helped me when I needed it most. As they rode away from Brimstone Creek, Pearl felt the weight of uncertainty pressing upon her. She'd escaped one danger, only to place her trust in a complete stranger. Yet something about August North's steady presence behind her, and the gentle way he handled the reins, told her she'd made the right choice, perhaps the only choice available to her in that moment. Where are we going? She asked, watching the town shrink into the distance. I have a small spread about a day's ride from here, August answered. It's not much, but it's safe. You can stay until you decide what you want to do next. Pearl nodded, feeling the exhaustion of the past months catching up with her. As the mare carried them into the foothills, she allowed herself to lean slightly against August's chest, finding unexpected comfort in the rhythmic sound of his heartbeat and the promise of sanctuary ahead. The journey to August's ranch took them through rolling hills covered with sage and prairie grass. As they rode, the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the landscape. Pearl remained quiet for most of the ride, processing the dramatic turn her life had taken. We should stop soon, August said as dusk approached. Make camp for the night. Pearl nodded, her body aching from the tension and stress of the day. When August guided the horse toward a small creek lined with cottonwood trees, she felt relief at the prospect of rest. They dismounted in a protected hollow near the water. August moved with practiced efficiency, establishing their camp while Pearl stood awkwardly, unsure of her place in this new arrangement. I can help, she finally offered, watching him gather wood for a fire. August glanced up with a smile that transformed his serious face. I'd appreciate that. There's a canteen in the saddlebag if you'd like to fill it at the creek. Grateful for the task, Pearl retrieved the canteen and made her way to the water's edge. As she knelt on the bank, she caught her reflection in the clear stream, hair disheveled, face smudged with dirt, eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. She barely recognized herself. After filling the canteen, she splashed water on her face, welcoming its cool caress against her skin. When she returned to camp, August had a small fire crackling and was laying out provisions from his saddlebags. It's not much, he said apologetically, offering her jerky and hardtack. I wasn't planning on company. It's more than I've had in days, Pearl replied honestly, accepting the simple meal with gratitude. She hesitated before asking, How did you know my father? August settled across from her, the firelight casting shadows across his features. 3 years ago, I was passing through this territory, heading north to find work. Got caught in a blizzard, the kind that freezes a man's blood. Your father found me half dead on the road and brought me to your ranch. He paused, his gaze distant with memory. He nursed me back to health, gave me work for the winter, taught me about ranching in this part of the country. I remember now, Pearl said softly. You worked our north pasture. I didn't recognize you. You were thinner then, and wore a beard. August nodded. I moved on that spring, worked my way through Montana, saved enough to buy my own place eventually. His expression darkened. I heard about your father's passing when I came to town last month. People were talking about how Stokes had manipulated the bank to call in your father's loans early. Stokes wanted our water rights, Pearl explained, the bitterness creeping into her voice. When father refused to sell, Stokes found another way to take what he wanted. She stared into the fire. After father died, I had nowhere to go. The bank seized everything, and none of our neighbors would take me in. They were all afraid of crossing Stokes. How did you end up? August trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the question. At that auction, Pearl finished for him. I was working as a dishwasher at the hotel in Brimstone Creek. The owner's wife accused me of stealing. I didn't. But it didn't matter, no one would take my word against hers. She swallowed hard. The sheriff gave me a choice, jail or indentured service, to pay my supposed debt. I suspect Stokes arranged the whole thing. August's jaw tightened. That sounds like something he'd do. They fell silent, the crackling fire and distant coyote calls the only sounds in the gathering darkness. Pearl finished her meager meal, fatigue washing over her in waves. You should rest, August said, noticing her drooping eyelids. I've laid out a bedroll for you. I'll keep watch. Pearl wanted to protest, but knew she lacked the energy. She moved to the bedroll he'd prepared and lay down, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. As sleep claimed her, Pearl's last conscious thought was that for the first time in months, she felt something close to safe. Morning arrived with pink-gold light filtering through the cottonwood branches. Pearl woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, scanning the campsite. August was already awake, tending to the horses nearby. He looked up as she stirred, offering a tentative smile. Morning. There's coffee if you'd like some. Pearl made her way to the small fire where a pot of coffee bubbled. Did you sleep at all? She asked, noticing the shadows beneath his eyes. Enough, he replied, though she suspected it wasn't true. We should reach my place by mid-afternoon if we start soon. They shared a breakfast of the remaining provisions before breaking camp. Once again, they rode double on the gray mare, making steady progress through the increasingly rugged terrain. As the sun climbed higher, the landscape changed. More pine trees dotted the hills, and the distant mountains seemed closer. Just over that ridge, August said near noon, pointing ahead. That's my land. When they crested the hill, Pearl drew in a sharp breath. Below them stretched a modest valley, with a small cabin nestled against a stand of pines. A creek wound through the property, and a corral stood near a weathered barn. It wasn't grand, but to Pearl's eyes, it looked like paradise after the hardships of recent months. It's beautiful, she said honestly. It's a work in progress, August replied, though she could hear the pride in his voice. The previous owner let it fall into disrepair. I've been fixing it up for the past year. As they approached the cabin, Pearl noticed the neat vegetable garden to one side and the freshly split wood stacked against the barn. Signs of care and attention that spoke of a man building something to last. August helped her dismount when they reached the yard, then took the mare to the barn. Pearl stood uncertainly, unsure what to do with herself in this unfamiliar place. When August returned, he seemed to sense her discomfort. Let me show you around, he offered. It's not much, but there's clean water from the well and a roof that doesn't leak. Mostly. The cabin was simple but tidy. One main room with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a curtained-off section that Pearl assumed was the sleeping area. Everything was basic but clean, with signs of August's handiwork throughout shelves made from reclaimed wood. A rocking chair by the fireplace, handmade curtains on the windows. You'll take the bed, August said, gesturing to the curtained area. I'll sleep by the fire. I can't take your bed, Pearl protested. You've already done so much. Please, August insisted. It would make me feel better knowing you're comfortable. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly appearing younger and less certain. I realize this is unconventional, a young woman staying with a man she barely knows. But I promise you'll be safe here, Miss Harrington. The formality made Pearl smile despite herself. I think after everything that's happened, you can call me Pearl. A flush crept up August's neck. Pearl, then. He cleared his throat. There's a washroom out back, just a simple setup. But there's soap and clean towels. You might want to freshen up while I prepare something to eat. Grateful for the chance to wash away the grime of her ordeal, Pearl accepted his direction to the small wash house behind the cabin. Inside, she found a metal tub, a pitcher of water, and the promised soap and towels. The water was cold, but she didn't mind, scrubbing away days of dirt and fear, trying to reclaim some sense of herself in the process. When she returned to the cabin, her face and hands clean and her hair combed as neatly as possible, August had prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. "This looks wonderful," Pearl said, realizing how hungry she was. They ate in companionable silence, the awkwardness between them gradually easing. As Pearl finished her meal, she found herself studying August when he wasn't looking, the careful way he handled the dishes, the quiet competence in his movements, the occasional glance he sent her way when he thought she wouldn't notice. "What happens now?" she finally asked, as he placed the last clean dish on the shelf. August turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "That depends on what you want, Pearl. You're not beholden to me in any way. I didn't buy you, I freed you." "I know that," she said softly, "and I'm grateful. But I have nowhere else to go, no money, no family." "You can stay here as long as you need," August offered. "I could use help around the place, if you're willing, in exchange for room and board, not as payment for anything else." He emphasized the distinction carefully. "When you decide what you want to do next, if you want to move on to a town or find work elsewhere, I'll help you get there." Pearl considered his offer, weighing her limited options. She knew nothing about this man beyond his kindness to her and his connection to her father, yet something told her she could trust him. "I'd like to stay," she decided, "at least for now. And I'll earn my keep." Relief crossed August's features. "Good. That's good." He shifted awkwardly. "It's been a long day. You should get some rest." That night, as Pearl lay in August's bed behind the curtain, listening to him settle on a bedroll near the fireplace, she felt a curious mixture of emotions, gratitude, uncertainty, and an unexpected flutter of something else when she recalled the gentle way August had looked at her across the dinner table. It was too soon for such thoughts, she told herself firmly. Too soon after her ordeal, too soon after meeting him. Yet, as sleep claimed her, Pearl couldn't help but wonder if perhaps, against all odds, she had found not just sanctuary but something more in this quiet valley with this quiet man. The following days established a rhythm to their coexistence. August rose before dawn to tend to his small herd of cattle and the few horses he kept, while Pearl took charge of the garden and cooking. They worked together on repairs to the barn and cabin, their initial awkwardness gradually giving way to an easy companionship. Pearl discovered that August was a man of few words but thoughtful actions. He never mentioned the circumstances of their meeting unless she brought it up, never made her feel indebted, and always asked rather than assumed when it came to her preferences or comfort. A week into her stay, August returned from town with supplies and a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For you," he said, placing it on the table where Pearl was kneading bread dough. She wiped her hands on her apron, surprised by the gesture. Inside the package, she found fabric enough for a new dress and a wooden hairbrush. "I noticed yours was broken," August explained, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "And I thought, well, you might want something new to wear besides what you had when—" He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable referencing the auction. Pearl ran her fingers over the soft calico, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. This is very kind." "It's nothing," he replied, though the pleased look in his eyes suggested otherwise. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and crimson, Pearl found herself studying August's profile. In the weeks she'd known him, she'd learned he was more educated than most men in these parts, that he read poetry by lamplight, and that despite his solitary nature, he had a dry wit that occasionally surfaced in unexpected moments. "Why did you never marry?" she asked impulsively, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." August didn't seem offended. He continued watching the horizon, silent long enough that Pearl thought he might not answer. "Never found the right person, I suppose," he finally said. "Or perhaps I never stayed in one place long enough to look properly." He glanced at her. What about you? A woman of your age in these parts is usually married with children already. Pearl smiled ruefully. There were suitors, but my father was particular. Said most of them were after our land more than my hand. Her smile faded. He was right about that, at least where Stokes was concerned. He asked for my hand 3 times, started when I was 16. Father refused him each time. August's expression darkened at the mention of Stokes. That man won't give up easily. He's known for holding grudges. You think he'll come looking for me? Pearl asked, a chill running through her despite the warm evening. It's possible, August admitted. Not right away, perhaps. He'll want to save face after being outbid. But eventually, the unspoken threat hung between them, dampening the peaceful evening. I should leave, Pearl said suddenly. I'm putting you in danger by staying here. August turned to face her fully, his expression intense. No, this is your home now, if you want it to be. I won't let fear of a man like Stokes dictate our lives. Our lives. The casual phrasing made Pearl's heart beat faster, though she knew he hadn't meant it the way it sounded. Besides, he continued with a hint of a smile, I'm not without resources. I have friends in these parts, good people who stand against Stokes and his kind. Pearl wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe she could stay in this peaceful valley with this man who had shown her nothing but kindness. All right, she agreed, but promise me you'll be careful. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. August's expression softened. Nothing will happen, he assured her, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. The next morning, Pearl used the fabric August had brought to begin making herself a new dress. It had been months since she'd worn anything but the threadbare clothing she'd had when the bank seized her father's property. The act of creating something new felt symbolic, somehow a fresh start. As she worked, seated in the rocking chair by the cabin window, August came in from the barn, his shirt sleeves rolled up and a smudge of dirt across his forehead. Seeing her at work, he paused, watching her hands move deftly with the needle and thread. You're skilled at that, he observed. Pearl looked up with a smile. My mother taught me before she passed. She said a woman should know how to make beauty from simple things. August nodded, his eyes lingering on her face longer than usual. Your mother was right. He cleared his throat. I'm heading to the north pasture to check the fence line. I'll be back by sundown. After he left, Pearl continued her sewing, aware of a growing warmth in her chest whenever she thought of August. His quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. It was dangerous territory, these feelings developing for a man who had rescued her. Was it true affection or merely gratitude confused for something deeper? She was still pondering this question when a sound outside caught her attention. Hoofbeats approaching the cabin, too soon to be August returning. Pearl set aside her sewing and moved cautiously to the window, her heart racing. 3 riders were approaching from the main road, none of them August. As they drew closer, Pearl's blood ran cold. She recognized the lead rider as one of Vernon Stokes' ranch hands. She'd seen him in town, always hovering near his employer like a faithful hound. Pearl retreated from the window, mind racing. August kept a shotgun by the door. She'd seen him clean it. She grabbed the weapon, checking it was loaded as her father had taught her years ago. Then she positioned herself by the window, where she could see the approaching men without being easily spotted. The riders stopped in the yard. The lead man, a scar-faced individual named Reese, dismounted and approached the cabin. "Hello, the house," he called. "Anybody home?" Pearl remained silent, the shotgun steady in her hands. Reese turned to his companions. "Check the barn," he ordered one of them, while gesturing the other toward the back of the cabin. When Reese stepped onto the porch and reached for the door handle, Pearl knew she couldn't remain hidden. "Stop right there," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "I have a shotgun trained on you, and I know how to use it." Reese froze, then slowly raised his hands. "No need for that, miss. We're just looking for August North. Got a message for him." "He's not here," Pearl replied. "And I don't believe you have a message. Mr. Stokes sent you to find me, didn't he?" A smile spread across Reese's weathered face. "Smart girl. Mr. Stokes was right about you." He lowered his hands slightly. "Why don't you come on out, Miss Harrington? Mr. Stokes just wants to talk." "I have nothing to say to him," Pearl answered, tightening her grip on the shotgun. Now get off this property before I'm forced to defend it. Reese's smile vanished. That's not how this works, girl. You're coming with us one way or another. Mr. Stokes paid good money for you. He lost the bidding, Pearl retorted. Fair and square. There wasn't anything fair about it, Reese spat. That saddle tramp north had no right interfering in Mr. Stokes's business. He took a step toward the door. Now, put down that gun before you hurt yourself. Pearl fired a warning shot over his head, the blast shattering the quiet of the valley. The next one won't miss, she promised. Though her hands were now shaking with adrenaline, Reese ducked instinctively, then straightened with fury, contorting his features. You'll regret that, he snarled, drawing his pistol. Before either could make another move, a shot rang out from the direction of the barn. Reese staggered, clutching his shoulder as blood blossomed through his shirt. Drop the gun, came August's commanding voice as he emerged from the barn, rifle aimed squarely at Reese. Tell your men to do the same, or the next one goes through your heart. The other two ranch hands, emerging from their search positions, froze at the sight of their wounded leader and August's unwavering rifle. Do as he says, Reese grunted, letting his pistol fall to the ground. Pearl watched from the window as August methodically disarmed all three men, his movements precise and controlled, despite the tension evident in his stance. You tell Stokes that Pearl Harrington is under my protection, August said, his voice cold with suppressed anger. If he sends anyone else to my property, they won't leave alive. He gestured toward their horses. Now get out and take care of that shoulder before you bleed out. The men mounted their horses, Reese grimacing in pain as he climbed awkwardly into the saddle. This ain't over, North, he warned. Stokes doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. Neither do I, August replied evenly. Remember that. Once the riders were out of sight, August hurried to the cabin. Pearl met him at the door, the shotgun still in her trembling hands. Are you all right? They both asked simultaneously, then shared a brief, tension-breaking smile. I'm fine, Pearl assured him, setting down the weapon. How did you know they were here? I didn't, August admitted, running a hand through his hair. I forgot my canteen and came back to get it. Heard the shot as I was approaching. His eyes darkened with concern. This is my fault. I should have anticipated Stokes would move this quickly. It's not your fault, Pearl insisted. None of this is. She hesitated before adding, but you're right, Stokes won't give up. He'll send more men, or come himself. August nodded grimly. We need to be prepared. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You handled yourself well. Most people would have panicked. I was terrified, Pearl confessed, but I wasn't going to let them take me without a fight. Something flickered in August's eyes, pride perhaps, or admiration. You're stronger than you know, Pearl Harrington. That night, neither of them slept well. August insisted on taking watch from the porch, refusing Pearl's suggestions that they take turns. She lay awake behind the curtain, listening to his occasional movements outside, her mind replaying the confrontation and what might have happened had August not returned when he did. By morning, August had formulated a plan. We need allies, he told Pearl over breakfast. People who can help us stand against Stokes if it comes to that. Who did you have in mind? The Wilsons, for one, their ranch borders Stokes's to the east. And they've had their own troubles with him. And Sheriff Davis in Liberty Creek, he's not in Stokes's pocket like the one in Brimstone. Liberty Creek? Pearl asked. That's nearly 2 days' ride from here. August nodded. We'll go together. It's not safe for you to stay here alone, and I need to talk to the sheriff directly. He hesitated. There's also something else we should consider, for your protection. Pearl raised an eyebrow, waiting. If we were to marry, August said carefully, watching her reaction, it would make it harder for Stokes to press any claim on you. A husband's rights supersede almost everything else in these parts. Pearl stared at him, momentarily speechless. You want to marry me for protection? Not just for protection, August replied, his usual composure slipping. I know it's sudden and perhaps presumptuous of me, but I've come to care for you, Pearl, more than I expected to. He took a deep breath. But I would understand completely if you don't feel the same, or if you need more time. Pearl's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. She'd been developing feelings for August, certainly, but marriage? So soon? Yet the practical part of her recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. "May I think about it?" she asked quietly. "Of course," August responded immediately. "Take all the time you need. Either way, we should make the trip to Liberty Creek." They spent the day preparing for the journey, securing the cabin and barn as best they could in case Stokes's men returned in their absence. Pearl packed the partially finished dress along with her few other belongings, hoping she'd have the chance to complete it. As the sun began to set, they sat together on the porch, the evening breeze carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. Pearl had been quiet most of the day, contemplating August's proposal and her own tangled feelings. "I've been thinking," she finally said. August turned to her, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes? About your suggestion marriage." Pearl met his gaze steadily. "I think you're right that it would offer protection, but marriage should be more than a practical arrangement." "It should," August agreed softly. "I care for you too, August," Pearl admitted. "These past weeks, despite everything, have been special to me. I've seen the kind of man you are, honorable, kind, thoughtful." She took a deep breath. "But I need to know something. Anything. If there were no threat from Stokes, if I wasn't in danger, would you still want to marry me?" August's expression softened. "Pearl, I would have waited longer to ask, given you more time to be certain of your feelings. But make no mistake." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against hers. "I would have asked eventually, danger or no danger." Pearl studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity, but finding only honest emotion in his clear blue eyes. "Then yes," she said quietly. "I'll marry you, August North." The smile that transformed his serious face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "I promise to be a good husband to you, Pearl, to protect you, respect you, and, if you'll allow it, to love you." The tenderness in his voice made Pearl's heart swell. On impulse, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a brief, gentle kiss that nonetheless sent warmth cascading through her entire body. When she pulled back, August looked momentarily stunned, before a slow smile spread across his face. "I suppose that seals our agreement," he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. Pearl smiled in return, surprised by her own boldness, yet certain of her decision. "I suppose it does." They left for Liberty Creek at dawn the next morning, riding double on August's remaining horse. The journey would take the better part of 2 days, following trails through increasingly rugged country, to avoid main roads where Stokes's men might be watching. As they rode, Pearl leaning against August's solid presence, she marveled at the strange path her life had taken. A month ago, she'd been facing a life of servitude, or worse. Now she was traveling toward a new beginning, with a man she was coming to love, a man who had seen value in her when others saw only property. "You're priceless to me," he had said that first day. Words spoken to a stranger then, but which now held the promise of a shared future neither of them could have anticipated. By mid-morning, they reached a high ridge overlooking a valley Pearl didn't recognize. August reined in the horse, allowing them both to appreciate the vista rolling hills, giving way to distant mountains, the landscape painted in the vibrant greens and golds of late spring. "It's beautiful," Pearl murmured. "It is," August agreed, his arms secure around her waist. "My father used to say that Montana holds all of God's best work in one territory. I think he was right." "You never talk about your family," Pearl observed. August was quiet for a moment before responding. "Not much to tell. Father was a carpenter from Pennsylvania who came west after the war. Mother died when I was young. Father raised me on his own, taught me his trade." His voice softened. "He died 5 years ago, consumption." "I'm sorry," Pearl said, understanding the loss all too well. "He would have liked you," August told her, urging the horse forward along the ridge. "Said a man should find a woman with spirit and kindness in equal measure." Pearl smiled at the thought. "And your mother? What was she like?" "Beautiful, strong. She could play the piano like an angel, according to my father." August's voice held a distant quality, the memory clearly secondhand. "I have her eyes, or so I was told." They continued their journey, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their small joys and sorrows. With each mile, Pearl felt the bond between them, strengthening not just the practical alliance they had agreed upon, but something deeper and more lasting. By nightfall, they made camp in a protected hollow, similar to where they had stopped on their first journey together. This time, however, there was a new ease between them as they worked together to establish their camp, prepare a simple meal, and settle for the night. August still insisted Pearl take the bedroll while he kept watch, but now she reached for his hand before settling to sleep, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Wake me for the second watch," she insisted. "You need rest too." To her surprise, August agreed with a rueful smile. "You're already proving to be a sensible wife." "Not your wife yet," Pearl reminded him, though the thought sent a pleasant flutter through her chest. "Soon enough," August replied, his tone making the simple phrase sound like a promise of everything good to come. The next day brought them to Liberty Creek by mid-afternoon, a town larger and more prosperous-looking than Brimstone Creek, with proper buildings lining a wide main street and even a small church at the far end. "First stop is the sheriff's office," August said as they rode into town. "Then we'll find the preacher." Sheriff Thomas Davis proved to be everything the Brimstone Creek lawman was not: forthright, principled, and immediately concerned when August explained the situation with Stokes and the illegal auction. "That sort of business won't be tolerated in my jurisdiction," he assured them, his weathered face grave. "I've had my eye on Stokes for some time, suspected him of rustling and intimidation, but haven't been able to make any charges stick." "He's careful," August agreed, "and has enough men on his payroll to keep his hands clean." Sheriff Davis stroked his graying mustache thoughtfully. "This auction business might be what we need to finally bring him down. It's federal law he's breaking there." He focused on Pearl. "Would you be willing to testify against him, Miss Harrington? It would be dangerous, but it might put an end to his operations for good." Pearl straightened her shoulders. "I would." "Good girl." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Now, about this marriage, you're sure about this? Both of you? It's not something to enter into lightly, even under these circumstances." "We're sure," August and Pearl answered in unison, exchanging a glance that made the sheriff's stern expression soften. "Well then, Reverend Michaels at the church should be able to help you, and I'd be honored to stand as witness." An hour later, Pearl stood beside August in the small church, wearing her old dress but with freshly washed hair and wildflowers August had quickly gathered for her to hold. Reverend Michaels, a kind-faced man with spectacles perched on his nose, performed a simple but dignified ceremony with Sheriff Davis and the Reverend's wife as witnesses. When it came time for the vows, August took Pearl's hands in his voice steady and sure as he promised to love, honor, and protect her all the days of his life. Pearl's own voice trembled slightly as she made the same promises in return, overcome by the solemnity of the moment and the unexpected path that had led her here. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Michaels declared with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." August's kiss was gentle and reverent, his hands cradling her face as if she were made of precious glass. When they parted, Pearl saw in his eyes not just affection, but a fierce protectiveness that told her more clearly than words that he would defend their new bond with his life, if necessary. After the ceremony, Sheriff Davis insisted on treating them to dinner at the town's best hotel, a celebration, and a chance to discuss their next steps. "I'll send telegrams to federal marshals about Stokes," the sheriff explained over beefsteak and potatoes. "But it may take time for them to investigate and act. Meanwhile, you two should be careful." "We will," August assured him. "I've already spoken to some neighbors about forming a protective alliance. Stokes has made enemies of most decent folks in the area." "Smart," the sheriff approved. "Strength in numbers." After dinner, Davis insisted on paying for a room at the hotel for the night. "A proper wedding gift," he called it, with a twinkle in his eye that made Pearl blush. Alone in the hotel room, the first real privacy they had had since meeting Pearl, found herself suddenly shy. August seemed to sense her nervousness and made no move to rush her, instead sitting in the room's single chair while she took the bed. "This isn't how I imagined our wedding night," he said after a moment, a rueful smile playing at his lips. "Running from danger, married in haste." "How did you imagine it?" Pearl asked, curious. August's eyes softened. I'd have courted you properly, taken you on buggy rides on Sunday afternoons, brought you wildflowers and perhaps a ribbon for your hair from town. His smile deepened. I'd have asked your father's permission, then proposed on a summer evening under the stars. The vision he painted made Pearl's heart ache with its simple beauty. That sounds lovely, she admitted. But I wouldn't change what we have, August, not even the danger that brought us together. August rose from the chair and came to sit beside her on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. Nor would I, he said softly. You're the best thing that's happened to me, Pearl, auction block and all. The unexpected humor made Pearl laugh, dispelling the tension between them. When August leaned forward to kiss her, she met him halfway, her hands finding their way to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. Unlike their previous kisses, this one deepened, carrying with it all the emotions they'd held in check during their brief courtship: desire, tenderness, and the fierce joy of finding something precious in the midst of danger. When they finally parted, breathless, August rested his forehead against hers. I want to do right by you, Pearl, he murmured, in every way. Pearl smiled, her earlier nervousness replaced by a steady certainty. You already are, she whispered, drawing him back to her. That night, in the quiet privacy of their hotel room, they discovered each other fully for the first time, learning the contours of each other's bodies, the places that brought pleasure, the whispered words that kindled desire. August was gentle yet passionate, attentive to Pearl's responses, making their first union as husband and wife a profound expression of their growing love, rather than merely a consummation of their hasty marriage. Afterward, lying in August's arms as moonlight filtered through the curtains, Pearl felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before her father's death. Whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. What are you thinking? August asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Pearl smiled against his chest. That I'm glad you outbid Vernon Stokes. August's chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. Best trade I ever made. The journey back to August's ranch, their ranch now, Pearl reminded herself, took longer than their trip to Liberty Creek. They traveled cautiously, taking less used trails and keeping watch for any sign of Stokes's men. Sheriff Davis had warned them to remain vigilant until the federal marshals could investigate the illegal auction. During one rest stop near a mountain stream, Pearl finally had the opportunity to ask something that had been on her mind since their wedding. August, she began, watching him fill their canteens from the clear water. That day at the auction, you said I was priceless to you. He looked up, a slight smile playing at his lips. I remember. You didn't know me then. Why would you say such a thing to a stranger? August sat back on his heels, considering her question. Because it was true, he said simply. Every human life has value beyond measure, but also, he hesitated, then continued more softly. Something in your eyes spoke to me. The way you held yourself with dignity even in that terrible situation. I knew then you were someone special. The sincerity in his voice made Pearl's heart swell. I think I started falling in love with you in that moment, she admitted. When you looked at me as a person, not property. August stood and crossed to where she sat on a fallen log, taking her hands in his. And I've been falling more in love with you every day since, he told her, his blue eyes intense with emotion. Their kiss was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving at speed along the trail below them. Quick, August whispered, pulling Pearl into the dense underbrush beside the stream. They crouched together, barely breathing, as 5 riders passed below Stokes's men, unmistakable with their distinctive hat bands bearing the rancher's cattle brand. They're heading toward our place, August murmured once the riders were out of earshot. They must have been watching the trails. Pearl's stomach clenched with fear. What do we do? August's expression was grim but determined. We need to warn our allies, then circle back to the ranch from another direction. If Stokes thinks he can intimidate us by destroying our property, he's about to learn otherwise. They abandoned their planned route, instead making for the Wilson Ranch, their closest neighbors, and the ones August had mentioned as potential allies against Stokes. The Wilsons, Robert and Martha, along with their grown sons, welcomed them warmly despite the unexpected arrival. Stokes has been a thorn in everyone's side for too long, Robert Wilson declared when August explained the situation. About time someone stood up to him. He's got at least 5 men heading toward our place, August told them, probably planning to burn us out or worse. Not if we can help it, Wilson replied, already calling for his sons. Boys, saddle up, and send riders to the Hendersons and the McCarthys. Tell them it's time to deal with Stokes once and for all. Pearl watched in amazement as the Wilson household sprang into action, Martha offering her a fresh dress while the men prepared weapons and horses. Within an hour, a force of nearly 15 armed ranchers and cowhands had assembled, ready to ride to August's defense. "You should stay here," August told Pearl as he prepared to leave with the others. "It'll be safer." "No," Pearl replied firmly. "That's our home, August. I'm coming with you." August studied her face for a moment, then nodded. "Stay close to me," he conceded, helping her onto a horse borrowed from the Wilsons. The group approached August's ranch near sunset, using a back trail that circled behind the property. From their vantage point on a wooded rise, they could see Stokes's men in the yard below, 2 keeping watch, while the others carried furniture and belongings from the cabin, piling them in the center of the yard. "They're planning to burn everything," Robert Wilson muttered, his weathered face tight with anger, "just like they did to the Perkins place last year." "Not this time," August replied, his voice cold with determination. He turned to the assembled men. "We outnumber them 3-1. I want them captured, not killed if possible. Sheriff Davis is building a case against Stokes. We need witnesses." The ranchers nodded their agreement, spreading out to surround the property before August gave the signal, a single shot fired into the air. The ensuing confrontation was brief but intense. Surprised and outnumbered, Stokes's men nonetheless fought fiercely until it became clear they had no chance of victory. 2 were wounded in the exchange of gunfire. One of August's allies took a bullet to the arm as well, but within minutes, all 5 of Stokes's men were disarmed and secured. Pearl had remained behind the protective line of defenders, but once the shooting stopped, she rode down to join August in the yard. The sight of their possessions scattered and some of their furniture broken filled her with anger, but she felt a fierce pride watching August and the other ranchers standing tall against the bullies who had terrorized the region for too long. "You made a mistake, North," spat the leader of Stokes's men, the same Reese who had confronted Pearl days earlier, his shoulder now bandaged from his previous wound. "Mr. Stokes won't forget this." "I'm counting on it," August replied evenly. "Tell your boss we're sending riders for Sheriff Davis tonight. These illegal raids end now." The captured men were secured in August's barn under guard, while 2 of Wilson's sons rode for Liberty Creek to fetch the sheriff. The rest of the allies helped August and Pearl restore order to their home, repairing what damage they could and establishing a defensive perimeter around the property. That night, sitting together on their porch while armed men kept watch from the barn and corral, Pearl and August shared a quiet moment amid the tension. "This isn't the peaceful homecoming I wanted for you," August said, his arm around Pearl's shoulders. She leaned into his embrace, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Peace will come," she replied with more confidence than she felt. "What matters is that we're standing our ground." August pressed a kiss to her temple. "You're remarkable, Pearl North. Most women would have fled at the first sign of trouble." The sound of her new name, Pearl North, sent a warm thrill through her, despite their precarious situation. "I'm not most women," she reminded him with a small smile. "And I've found something worth fighting for." The tender look August gave her in response said more than words could express. They sat together in companionable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, finding strength in each other for whatever challenges the coming days might bring. Sheriff Davis arrived the following afternoon with 4 deputies and official papers warrants for Vernon Stokes' arrest on charges of kidnapping, illegal human trafficking, destruction of property, and attempted murder. "The telegraph lines have been busy," he explained to August and Pearl as they stood in the yard. "Those federal marshals I contacted were mighty interested in Stokes' auction business. Turns out he's been doing it for years, buying and selling people under the guise of indentured service. They've been building a case, just needed witnesses willing to testify." "And now they have them," August observed, glancing toward the barn where Stokes' men were being loaded into a prison wagon. "Indeed they do." The sheriff's expression turned grave. "But Stokes himself isn't at his ranch. His foreman claims he rode out yesterday with several men, heading this way. Pearl exchanged a concerned look with August. "He's coming here?" "Likely," Davis confirmed. "We've got men watching the approaches, but he knows these hills better than most." August squared his shoulders. "Let him come. Better to end this now than live under the threat of his return." The sheriff nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. We'll be ready." The confrontation came at dawn the next day. Vernon Stokes and 8 heavily armed men rode boldly up the main trail to August's ranch, clearly expecting to find only the 5 men they'd sent ahead. Instead, they found themselves facing Sheriff Davis, his deputies, and a dozen determined ranchers arrayed across the yard. Stokes reined in his horse, his florid face darkening with rage when he spotted August standing at the center of the defensive line, Pearl beside him. "What's the meaning of this?" he demanded. "North, you've got my men. I've come to collect them." "Your men are under arrest, Stokes," Sheriff Davis called back. "And so are you." He held up the official warrant. "Federal charges for your illegal auction business, among other things." Stokes's face contorted with fury. "That's a damn lie. I operate within the law." "Tell that to Miss Harrington," August replied, his voice carrying across the yard. "Oh, wait, that's Mrs. North now. My wife can testify to exactly what kind of law you operate under." At the word wife, Stokes's control seemed to snap. He drew his pistol with surprising speed for a man of his bulk. "She was mine. I paid for her fair and square." "No man can own another," August responded evenly, not reaching for his own weapon despite the gun pointed in his direction. "Pearl is her own person, not property to be bought and sold." "Drop the weapon, Stokes," Sheriff Davis ordered. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. Don't make this worse than it already is." For a tense moment, it seemed Stokes might choose suicide by lawman rather than surrender. His finger tightened on the trigger as he aimed directly at August's chest. Pearl held her breath, fighting the urge to step in front of her husband. Then, with a guttural sound of frustrated rage, Stokes lowered his pistol. "This isn't over," he growled as Sheriff Davis approached to take his weapon and place him in handcuffs. "Yes, it is," the sheriff replied firmly. "The federal court in Helena will make sure of that." As Stokes was led away to join his men in the prison wagon, he shot one final venomous glare at Pearl and August. "You'll regret this, North, both of you. I have friends in high places." "And we have the law on our side," August responded calmly, "along with every decent rancher in this valley who's tired of living under your shadow." The assembled ranchers murmured their agreement, some spitting in the dust as Stokes passed. Years of intimidation and fear were finally ending, and the relief was palpable in every face. Once the prison wagon had departed, escorted by Sheriff Davis and his deputies, the gathered allies gradually dispersed as well, returning to their own ranches with handshakes and promises of continued support if needed. By evening, Pearl and August were alone on their property for the first time since their wedding. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple as they sat together on their porch steps. "Do you think it's really over?" Pearl asked, her head resting on August's shoulder. He considered the question carefully before answering. "The immediate danger, yes. Stokes will stand trial, and with multiple witnesses, he's likely to spend years in prison." August's arm tightened around her waist. "But the kind of hatred he represents that takes longer to defeat." Pearl nodded, understanding his meaning. "We'll face it together, whatever comes." "Together," August agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Always." They sat in companionable silence, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky, the events of the past weeks gradually settling into perspective. "You know," Pearl said after a while, "when my father died and everything fell apart, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I'd find happiness again, especially not like this." August turned to face her, his expression serious but tender. "When I saw you on that auction block, I was just trying to right a wrong. I never expected to find the other half of my soul." The simple poetry of his words brought tears to Pearl's eyes. "I love you, August North," she whispered, reaching up to touch his face. "Not because you saved me, but because of who you are, the man who sees value in every life, who fights for what's right, who loves with his whole heart." "And I love you, Pearl North," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Not for what you've endured, but for your strength, your kindness, your unwavering spirit." He smiled, that rare full smile that transformed his serious face. "You truly are priceless to me." Their kiss was both a promise and a celebration of dangers overcome, of a love forged in adversity, of a future they would build together on this land they had defended. As summer gave way to autumn, and autumn to a snow-dusted winter, August and Pearl's ranch flourished under their combined care. The cabin gained new rooms, the herd increased, and their reputation as fair and honorable neighbors spread throughout the valley. When spring returned, bringing wildflowers to the hillsides and new calves to the pastures, it brought something else as well, the news that Pearl was expecting their first child. "Are you happy?" Pearl asked, as they stood together in the garden sheet expanded, her hand resting on the slight curve of her belly. August's answering smile was radiant. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he told her, drawing her into his embrace. "You've given me everything I never knew I wanted a true partner, a home filled with love, and now a family of our own." Pearl rose on tiptoe to kiss him, marveling at how far they'd come from that terrible day at the auction block. "Not bad for a woman who was sold for a saddle," she teased gently. "The best trade of my life," August replied, his eyes crinkling with joy as he placed his hand over hers on her growing belly. "Though I still maintain you were always priceless." As they stood together in their garden, surrounded by the life they'd built and the love they'd found against all odds, Pearl knew that some things truly were beyond price: freedom, dignity, and the kind of love that sees value in every soul. These were the treasures August had offered her from the beginning, worth more than all the gold in Montana territory. And she had given him treasures in return: trust when she had every reason to doubt, strength when challenges arose, and a love that continued to deepen with each passing day. Together, they had transformed a hasty marriage of protection into a union of equals, built on respect, passion, and unwavering commitment. In the years that followed, their family grew: first a daughter with August's blue eyes and Pearl's spirit, then twin boys who brought equal measures of joy and mischief to the household. Their ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the territory for its fine horses and fair dealings. The shadow of Vernon Stokes faded as the man himself died in prison, his empire of fear dismantled by the courts and divided among those he had wronged. Sometimes on summer evenings when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Pearl and August would sit together on their porch and watch the stars, just as they had in those first precarious days of their marriage. In those moments, they would remind each other of how their unlikely love story began, with courage, compassion, and the recognition that every human life holds value beyond measure. "You're still priceless to me," August would whisper, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. And Pearl would smile, knowing that in a world that too often assigned price tags to people's worth, they had found something truly beyond valuation, a love that had transformed not just their own lives, but the entire valley they called home.